Hi everyone, it's Ash from FPL Hints, here with my first UCL draft for the 24-25 season, now that we know the fixtures at hand. As always, if you're able to like, share and subscribe, that will be greatly appreciated. So what I'm going to do is construct my first draft now that we know what the fixtures are. But before I do that, we'll look at the ratings of each of the respective fixtures. I'll also go over the probabilities as well in terms of the likelihood it is for teams to progress to the next round as well. So without further ado, let's get straight into it and go to the fixture difficulty rating first of all. So this has been made available on fantasyfootballpundit.com. I'll put a link in the description below, and this basically maps out all of the fixtures for the initial 8 games in the new group stage. And what we've got here is basically different color codes. So green or dark green appears to be an easier fixture, and then you've got the darker colors which indicate a more difficult fixture. So I'll just go through each of these team fixtures one by one, just as a quick overview. So we can see that with AC Milan, they start off with a few red block games, and then they've got the green block games. So I might avoid AC Milan players initially. Then you got Arsenal, got a mix there as well. I may want some Arsenal cover potentially, but certainly not a triple up with the fixtures that they have. You got Aston Villa, their first campaign in this Champions League format. Of course, they were the European champions back in 1982, but this is all new for them. To be fair, some reasonable games in the opening 4 matches, except that Bayern Munich fixture, so potential considerations there. Got Atlanta, who have a tricky start against Arsenal, but then they've got a series of green block games there. And you've got Atletico Madrid, mixed bag for them as well, but then you got a few green block games for them as the group stage or the league stage, as I say, progresses. Barcelona, I'd say reasonable fixtures for them, relatively green block, so definitely want some sort of attacking Barcelona cover there. Got Bayer Leverkusen, who obviously had a sensational 23-24 season, and I'd say they got reasonable fixtures there from their side. You got Bayern Munich, one of the heavyweights in this competition. Doesn't really matter who they face, but reasonable games for them. You got Barcelona as a red block game, and then Benfica. I'd say with them, fairly reasonable games with them as well. And then Bologna with them, not known for their Champions League prowess, but we can see they've got some interesting games in their openers. And you've got Brest, another team not known for their Champions League prowess. We can see with them, got a few green block games, but they are an unknown quantity. And you've got Celtic as well, perennial group stage contenders, albeit they very seldom progress beyond the group stage in their history. And they've got interesting opening fixture, but fairly mixed beyond that. And then Club Bruges got a mixed set there as well. And then the other team that we've got here, I don't want to mispronounce their name. I'll go by their English derivative, Red Star Belgrade, Benfica at home as their opener, and then some mixed matches after that. Dortmund finalists, a very healthy fixture run, albeit minus Real Madrid, a repeat of the final, but definitely worth considering some Dortmund assets there. You've got Dynamo Zagreb, tricky opening fixture, but then surprisingly reasonable run beyond that. And then you got Feyenoord, got a mixed bag there as well, and Girona, PSG with the opener, then some reasonable games for them. Again, another team that is an unknown quantity in Champions League football. You've got Inter Milan, perennial Champions League contenders. Tricky match against City in the opener, then some reasonable games. And then Juventus, got a mixed bag for them. Got Leipzig, I'd say very tricky run with Atletico Madrid, Juventus, and Liverpool, so may want to avoid their players. Got Lille, a lot of red block games for them as well. And you've got Liverpool, AC Milan away, and then Bologna at home for their opening games. But I'd say the likes of like Liverpool, Man City, almost fixture proof in terms of their standing. Then you got Monaco with the Zagreb and Red Star Belgrade in the opening two of the three, but they start with Barcelona. And PSG are there as well, with Girona at home in the opening game, then Arsenal, so mixed bag for them. And we've got Real Madrid, again, another fixture-proof team. Got Stuttgart at home as their opener, and then Lille, but then Dortmund at home and Milan at home thereafter. Salzburg, surprisingly reasonable run of games for them. Sparta Prague away, Brest at home, Dynamo Zagreb Feyenoord. So could have some potential budget options from there. And then Slovan Bratislava open with Celtic. And then Shakhtar Donetsk have some mixed fixtures for their openers. Sparta Prague, with them, a couple of reasonable opening games. But then they've also got Man City in their initial games, Sporting Lisbon, got Lille, PSV, Sturm Graz in their opening fixtures. And then talking of Sturm Graz, Brest, Club Brugge, and Sporting in their openers. And then you've got Stuttgart with Real Madrid for their opener, but then reasonable games beyond that. And then lastly, Young Boys open up with Aston Villa, but then they've got Barcelona and Inter Milan in their opening fixtures as well. And of course, this format is very different to the Champions League format from the last 20 years. The multiple group stages are no more. It's one big league format. And with that, there are different considerations in play. And it basically means, in a nutshell, every team in the Champions League this season will definitely play at least 4 more games than they would otherwise, and the teams that progress to the final will ultimately play 17 games. Now, before I construct my draft, I also want to just quickly consult the probabilities as well, which will also influence the way in which I construct this draft as well. And again, it's not to say that you just go with the probabilities because it's going to align with the way things go. But Man City and Real Madrid are the heavy favourites, so I definitely want to factor them into my consideration. Arsenal and Liverpool, surprisingly, also among the favourites, and then you've got the likes of Bayern and Barcelona, and even PSG, albeit without Mbappe, are considered among there as potential contenders. And then you've got the likes of Inter Milan, Leverkusen, and Atletico Madrid. Now, for those that watch my previous video, I'm cheating slightly because I do have a draft that I constructed without fixtures, which was, to my surprise, quite interesting that I wasn't aware that the game launched without the fixtures at hand, which it did. And the draft that I had constructed without knowing the fixtures is the one that you can see on screen there. So Benitez and Trubin as the goalkeepers, Schlotterbeck, Matson, Lewis, Acerbi, Araujo as the defenders, Bellingham, Saka, Yamal, Rogers, Witzel, and then the heavy set attack of Kane, Haaland, and Mbappe. So that is my reference point essentially in terms of the kind of team that I want to construct. And yet I did get some feedback that it seems like this is an FPL enthusiast that's playing UCL Fantasy, which I am. I've never claimed to be an expert of UCL Fantasy. I had a very good season last season up until the quarterfinals, I'd say, where I just took a few too many risks and it all went a bit wrong. So I'll probably play a bit more conservatively this year and we'll see how it goes. But I did enjoy it last season and had a good opening segment of the season itself. So with the options here, there are some changes that I am going to make, but I'm going to go straight to the blank canvas, as it were. So with the goalkeeping situation first and foremost, that's the area that I'll touch upon first. So with the Benitez and Trubin combination, if I just actually flip back for one moment, we saw with Benitez, he opens with Juventus, Sporting, and PSG. And then you've got Trubin, who opens with Red Star Belgrade, Atletico Madrid, and Feyenoord. So I could potentially stick with that combination, but I kind of feel that with the way that I'm focused on right now, I do also want that Dortmund defensive cover as well. And Schlotterbeck was in my initial draft, as you saw. So if I just go here on the goalkeeping front, the player, and I'll apply the filters, if I can just find him here, Kobel, there he is. So he was 4.5 million last season in UCL Fantasy, and he's now 5 million, and rightly so. 60 points last season. I do love the opening fixtures that Dortmund have. Got Bruges, Celtic, okay, got Real Madrid, and then got a couple of other reasonable games there as well. So I'm going to go for Kobel. He's not obviously a set and forget goalkeeper. We don't really have that in UCL Fantasy because we can, of course, rotate during match days. But he's definitely one that has caught my eye early on, and in he comes. Now I'll sort it by £4.5 million because that is his price tag. Apply the filters. There he is, Trubin. And looking at his fixtures, got Red Star Belgrade, Atletico Madrid, Feyenoord, Bayern, Monaco, and Bologna. So again, I kind of, in terms of rotation, of course, I'd play the goalkeeper that has the initial start, and then I'd rotate accordingly. And the added complication that we have now is we have like Thursday fixtures in UEFA Champions League as well, albeit shouldn't really affect the goalkeeping situation. But in terms of this first draft with the fixtures, Kobel and Trubin are my goalkeepers. And some might say that why don't you just go for another 4.5 goalkeeper? I could potentially, but the way I'm going to construct this draft, it's not going to be radically different from the first one, but I just want to ensure that I get the balance right as well. I've got no doubt you could have an amazing rotating pair through the fixture difficulty ratings that I've shown you, but for now, I'm fairly set on these two goalkeepers. But to unlock funds, I might potentially drop the 4.5 Kobel for a 4.5 goalkeeper. So let's go to the defense now. So select defenders, apply the filters, and just curious to see who are the trending players at this moment in time. You've got Saliba, Arsenal, you've got Rudiger, got Van Dijk, and Hakimi. And Hakimi is the player that I actually have in mind as one of my defenders. I accept that the criticism I had was that my team was very light in defense, and with Hakimi, you've got the attacking prowess. 5.5 million seems very cheap for him. And just a reminder of the fixtures for PSG: Girona, Arsenal, PSV, Atletico, Bayern, and Salzburg in those opening games. So fairly reasonable. So I think Hakimi is a no-nonsense pick there as well. But at the same time, because I've picked him, I am going to be a bit light as well. I wanted one premium defender, and Hakimi is that pick. So going to reduce my filter here to 4.5 million picks now, and I'll just sort it by percentage. There he is. So Lucas Beraldo of PSG as well. So I've got the PSG double up in defence. He's only 4 million, and I know he's been getting starts recently for PSG, but I want that £4 million enabler, and he won't be the only one. And it's not really the way the UCL Fantasy managers play the games by having more than one £4 million enabler. But I'm going to pick him because he's getting regular starts with PSG. Fixtures aren't too bad for them, but he's going to help me have a premium midfield and attack. On to the next player, and it's Thomas Araujo, also £4 million, opens with Red Star Belgrade, Atletico Madrid, Feyenoord in those opening games, so I could potentially start him in some of those games as well. And he's getting starts for the time being, so in he comes. And the other player who I also had in my other draft, and who's getting regular starts as well. Inverted fullback Rico Lewis, £4.5 million. Surprised, only selected by 4% of UCL Fantasy managers at this moment in time. And of course, he's got the opener against Inter Milan, but then the fixtures beyond that look fairly reasonable. So I'm happy to have him. And the other player who I also had in my draft without the fixtures, it's Inter Milan's Acerbi. Of course, Man City is a tricky match. You got Red Star Belgrade and Young Boys in the next match. £4.5 million. So just looking at the other options available, you've got Matson, but I don't know if Matson, who was in my pre-fixture draft, I'm not sure if he's actually going to get starts as of now. So that is the back line. I've spent 32 million on those 7 players, and no doubt the criticisms will be that it's a bit light in defence, despite having Hakimi and having Kobel. But I'm just, again, doing this so that I can enable the heavy set up top. So that brings me on to my midfielders for this draft. So apply the filters, just sort it by percentage owned, and just surprised that Lamine Yamal is 7.5 million. He's owned by half of UCL Fantasy managers at the time of recording, and I've got no doubt that his ownership will skyrocket. Very generous run of games, still very young at 17 years old. Recent winner of the Euros. He is a no-nonsense pick. Absolutely. So in he comes. And you've got Jude Bellingham there as well, but at the time of recording, he's picked up an injury. I'm not sure if he's going to be available for that first game, and he was in my actual first draft without the fixtures. So I think for the time being, I'm going to give him a miss. But the other player who actually was injured for Spain as well after in the final of the Euros and has been unavailable for Man City up until the last game is Rodri, who ordinarily I wouldn't have picked him if this was FPL, but he actually has done very reasonable in terms of his prowess in UCL Fantasy. The price tag, okay, is £7 million, but the ball recoveries metric alone, then obviously someone who's capable of assisting, scoring goals as well, had a very good season. I'd say that, some are saying that he's a potential Ballon d'Or winner as well. I think he's a no-nonsense pick. Because literally the ball recoveries metric swings it for me that you don't have that in FPL, but you do have it in UCL Fantasy. Hoping that rather than starting from the bench, he'll start the next match for Man City, and his fitness should hope to be up to speed by the time of match day 1. So in comes Rodri. So the other player I've got in mind, it's going to be Barcelona again. Someone who's actually had a very good start to the season. If I can just find him here. So there he is. Rafinha, only 7% owned, 7.5 million for Barcelona. I'm going to pick him in to this draft as well. Again, making the most of those fixtures for Barcelona. Monaco, Young Boys, you got Bayern, Red Star Belgrade, got Brest. I'd say very reasonable matches. You could forgive me and say, why haven't I gone for some Real Madrid midfielders right now? Bellingham would be the one if I wanted to, but then I'd have to kind of sacrifice the balance in midfield. If you recall from the previous video, I had Saka and Bellingham, but then had to cheapen out bits of the midfield as well. So I'd say it's a fairly balanced midfield as things stand. And then the other player I want, if I just go to the ownership, if I can find him there. So it won't be Mohamed Salah or Bellingham for now, but it is Bukayo Saka, integral member of Arsenal's attack, fixture proof, and yeah, I mean the fixtures don't even matter here, but he's going to be in my team, so no complaints there. Definitely want some sort of Arsenal attacking cover. Of course, he'll get regular starts in the Premier League as well. Minutes could be managed if Arsenal are doing well in domestic matches or Champions League matches, which is fine, but in he comes. And at times he is known to pick up a knock here and there, but he is someone who's been absolutely sensational for Arsenal over the past few seasons. Now, to make this work, I need a budget enabler as well. So going to go to the £4.5 million bargain bucket here, and let's see who we've got. Just going to go all the way up. There he is. So Bernardo getting regular starts for Benfica. Got Red Star, got Feyenoord. Again, wouldn't really want to start him unless I really had to, but I need a £4.5 million midfielder to make it work. And in terms of X-Mins, I think he is potentially safe. Now that leaves me with 32.5 million in the bank to complete my heavy front set. And it is really all about that attacking front line for me, as I've mentioned on the previous video as well. So let's just ramp it up. So onto my front line, I want a heavy set in attack. And I've said that it really doesn't matter with the likes of Haaland, Inter Milan in that opening match, then reasonable matches beyond that. 45% owned for a reason. Back-to-back hat-tricks in the Premier League at the time of recording. He is a no-nonsense pick, so in he comes. And the other player that I want to bring in, Mbappe, had a mixed start to his Real Madrid reign. Very reasonable fixtures. I haven't got a Real Madrid defender, goalkeeper, midfielder, but I'm certainly going to have him in my team, so in he comes. That leaves me with 10.5 million to spend, just short of Vinicius Jr. Don't want to really double up in Real Madrid attackers there potentially, because you've got so many other options in this new Champions League format. So you've got Alvarez against Atletico Madrid, got Lewandowski, Rodrigo, Kai Havertz, but really I can't look beyond Harry Kane. Had a very amazing 23-24 season. All he didn't do during that time was win a trophy. So I think he is the no-nonsense pick there for me to complete my first draft with fixtures for UCL Fantasy 24-25 ahead of Matchday 1. So I'd like to do my famous super zoom in once again to justify those picks. So Mbappe, Kane, and Haaland, just due to their attacking prowess and their fixture-proof ability across all competitions. Then that midfield, which is very balanced, of Yamal, Rodri, Rafinha, and Saka, again propped up by Bernardo of Benfica there. And then onto the defence, premium defender of Hakimi, and then this interesting palette of Beraldo, Araujo, Lewis, and Acerbi. Is it going to be sustainable beyond game week 1? It remains to be seen, but for my first draft with fixtures, I want to make it work. And if I feel that I'm a bit light in defence, I've got the peace of mind with Kobel and Trubin. I've got that extra I've got the extra £500,000 for Kobel that I could simply unlock, downgrade Kobel for a £4.5 million goalkeeper, and then potentially upgrade Araujo or Beraldo for a £4.5 million defender, or even Lewis or Acerbi for a £5 million defender. But for the time being, I'm content with this. Yes, it's risky. The defense is probably lighter than your elite UCL fantasy managers draft, but I like it. I can justify it for the time being. And what I'm going to do is I will certainly make an update to this draft between now and UCL Fantasy Matchday 1 for the 24-25 season. And I'll also confirm what my final draft is as well. But across the board, I feel I've checked the boxes. Premium goalkeeper, albeit didn't need one. Premium defender. I've got, I'd say, Saka, premium midfielder at a push, but I'd say it's a very balanced midfield to fund that front line of Mbappe, Kane, and Haaland. So let me know in the comments below what you think. Is this an improvement on my team that I had when I didn't know the fixtures? Is it too cutting edge? Or actually, have I checked all the right boxes? So I'd really appreciate your feedback. Like I've said, I'm not a UCL fantasy expert. I'm an FPL addict who is playing UCL fantasy and looking to build upon the season that I had in 23-24. As always, if you're able to like, share, and subscribe, that will be greatly appreciated. And wishing you all the best with your tinkering ahead of match day 1.